Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dwayne Spin Stop. Today we have Thorin Duffin here in the house, ready to tell us a lot about being a DJ, about sexuality, being gay in Singapore, the scene, as well as being an expat. There's so many things. But let's start off first with your fashion sense. I think that was an interesting thing for me to want to ask you about because it kind of almost for me defines you in a sense because it's pretty bold. And I mean, because if I think of wearing a jumpsuit out in Singapore or bearing my midriff, it's like it's I'm not as comfortable. So I'm like, kudos to Thorin for being able to do that. There's also a picture I saw of you with. Did you cut that out? Where your shirt?
I did, yeah. I had this shirt that it went down to about mid thigh. I don't know where I got it. It was some used clothing store, and it had a massive piece of vinyl, like white vinyl in the center. And I wore it a few times, but the white vinyl just made me sweat like ridiculously. And I was like, it doesn't really fit. And I don't know what aesthetic it was.
Right.
And I thought I'd just cut it up. So I just cut out the vinyl in the middle, and then it just made a massive window. So yeah, and I did some gig.
Did it have like a black border around?
Yeah, so it's a black shirt that had white vinyl. So then I cut the white vinyl, but there was a very half centimeter.
Right. So I'm just going to quickly flip through the photos so we get a sense of what we're talking about, with his permission, of course. Here.
Classic.
Well, also to show the six-pack, I guess.
I think it's just really good lighting, and I hadn't breathed in a few days for that picture.
And I just liked the whole. I really like your fashion sense, actually.
Thank you.
I wish I could carry it off. Overalls with was that a vest?
Well, no. So this was a sort of a dress shirt that's got some comic book pictures on it, but then I just took the sleeves off.
Right. Wow.
Just cut along the seam and hope they can't notice. But if it's busy enough, they can't see loose threads.
And then there was one other, which was this. So these look like rompers, but they're actually full length, right?
Yes, this is a full length, literally a jumpsuit, and I got this on Taobao for $10.
Wow.
And it's just flattering enough that it is almost too tight on the arms that it just gives a nice effect that once it catches the lighting, it actually makes you look like you know what you're doing. So it's a kind of a. But no, they're very. The problem with a lot of these, the hard part about trying to do in fashion in Singapore. I mean, first of all, I would say it's not massively thought out. I mean, it's relatively just sort of things that I'm like, oh, it looks nice, it's quite cute.
Right.
And then and generally, I like to buy things that are secondhand or stuff that is just cheap online, and then just sort of cut it up. So like, this is just sort of very average gay gym boy shirt, but I just took the sleeves off, So most of what I buy, and I think what's nice is when you start modifying clothes yourself, you have no real attachment to the clothes anymore. So often I'll wear t-shirts until I get bored of them, and then I'll, if I haven't worn the t-shirt in a while, or if, I used to do much flashier prints when I was younger, my youth, and and so I'll just take it off at the top. So like the crop top that was there, I had cropped one polo before, and then I was going to a gig and I was wearing high-waisted short trousers with that, and it was a pair of high-waisted trousers that were completely ill-fitting, like they were more just like curtains that had been strung up. And so I like doing going short I think can be a little bit, you can do it, but I think it's a little bit overt. And so I like going, if you're going to wear like a crop top or something, then on the bottom end wearing trousers or almost wearing something dressy, so there's sort of a juxtaposition.
So it's more balance.
Yeah, it sort of balances out. And then I've got, so like that one I would have worn these high-waisted trousers, and I think I was wearing like some sort of knockoff Timberlands. Right. And then I'd cut it to about middle, just above the belly button. Mm-hmm. And then I remember went out and I was like, so I just cut it much higher to the point that was pretty indecent.
I wonder though, like if you weren't maybe so as built, would you still dress the same way?
I think it's an interesting question.
Shoulders and if you didn't have a six-pack, would you?
No, I think so. I think concepts of positivity. I think it taps into a couple of things. It taps into body privilege. It taps into also like white privilege and moving through spaces where I have been able to move through these spaces without being so concerned what other people have thought about me, and a lot of that is tied into, in sort of inherent privilege. But then on top of that is also, because it's an interesting question in terms of if you had a less traditionally desirable body, how would that affect fashion decisions you were making, this kind of thing,
Right.
So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, as it were. I just try and be relatively cognizant of that Just be aware of that, like contextually, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I mean, generally, I just tell people that, you know, with like crop tops and things, it's very cooling, right? Because it's, you know, it's a hot country.
It's a hot country.
And so if you've got, you know, you've got the air coming in, you've got more surface area to cool down, and that to me is the important bit. But because I always used to notice, you know, people, you go to the gym and people have, you know, these kind of shirts that go, you know, down to their knee, you know, with that some slit down the side that you can, you know, have a family of 4 move into. And so I always thought, you know, you never really see people wearing crop tops, and you see a lot of girls wearing crop tops, but there's also some kind of coding as, you know, crop tops themselves are overtly femme or whatever.
Right.
And so I thought, you know, if I'm showing 2 centimeters of skin above my waist, but you've got your arms covered, there's a lot less skin that's being showed than if I'm wearing something that, you know, I've got 3 nipples hanging out of. So
exactly. Right.
So that's kind of
interesting. Yeah. So the next thing we're going to move on to is actually, I always like to ask my guests to get to know them a little bit more. Also, is to ask the universe a question.
Okay.
And then we're going to use these cards. I mean, like, you can take it or leave it. You don't have to believe in it, but I do these for fun.
Okay.
And so think of a question. Well, first of all, choose a deck. There's a mermaids and dolphins deck.
Oh, absolutely, mermaids and dolphins.
All right, the fabulous one. All right, and while you think of your question, speaking of fashion, today I'm actually trying something that is more my style than what I normally wear on the show. So just because Thorin's so like bold, I thought I should just try to be a bit more bold this episode. So while you think of your question, I just want to say again, shout out, thanks to the people at Yishu who are at CityLink Mall. They've sponsored this vest and the clothes so far on the episode. They also have a pants that are sort of like a skirt, which they say is not selling as quickly because I you know, Singaporean men are just.
Are they just like low crotch pants? Or
no, they come down to like below your knee, and they perhaps you could have a look at it. I mean, like I'll show you a picture after. Yeah. They've got very interesting stuff. Like it's sort of Asian. They feature Asianness, and so even with this, I don't know. I think.
And I think it's hard to see though from the it's hard to see from here too. But also the textures. I mean, you're playing with a lot of textures, which is very cute.
There's brown and there's something's different, right? Where is it? Oh, I can't. It feels the same though, but
we've got
right?
like, there's like a mandarin collar here, and then you've got very like the texture here. Is this linen? It's not linen, right?
Oh, this is another shirt though, but this is.
Yeah, it's not the same shirt. Right?
No, it's not. this is not from them, but I thought to match.
Oh, you're talking about this
the vest. The vest is from Yishu. Yeah, this is see-through. I mean, so I'm using the vest to sort of like hide.
Tell me about the buttoning convention. I've never seen a bottom button done up and the top one's not.
Well, I'm just doing it how I feel comfortable, because if I button it too much, it looks to me it looks a little stiff. But I think, technically you should button everything, right?
Yeah, but I mean, Prince Philip's dead. You don't need to worry about it.
I don't know. So this is a complete experiment for me. But anyhow, do you have your question?
Okay, I suppose so. I suppose the question, or one of the more pressing questions I've had is, at what point will we be able to go to nightclubs again, or throw nightclubs events?
Okay, you're
is that the kind of question?
Yes, it can work, but you'll get it in a very sort of like. Vague way, but it could make sense though. And usually it does. So tell me when to stop. You can either pick the top card, or I can still spread it out and you can take something.
Okay, stop. Yeah, you put it on top of this one. Yeah. Okay, I'll take the top card.
All right.
And then just read it off.
Just read it off.
Make a wish. This is a magical moment. Make a wish and enjoy its manifestation.
Interesting. So it's telling you to actually make a wish for it to come true. So it makes sense, right?
That's a lot of responsibility.
Say an affirmative prayer right now, which means stating your desire as if it were already true. And thank the heavens for this reality, and feel in your heart and belly, I don't know why belly, that your dream is actually a reality.
I like it.
It's pretty, yeah, it's simple. It's a simple answer.
There's a wonderful sort of unicorn picture as well that I'm really drawn to.
Right.
No, cute. Well, hopefully, okay.
Make that wish, and it's already almost happening, isn't it?
I can feel it in my water.
Yes. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we move on to being a DJ, and this is the exciting part, because this is what Thorin does on top of being a scientist. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we also have the cross sleeve. This is my little suitcase. I don't want to lift it too high because I think it's going to so it's a little suitcase, but is it still in? Like,
it's still in.
And we'll play a vinyl later on. We'll talk about vinyls because vinyls and DJing has a very has a it's correlated, right?
Oh, very much so.
It started out that way, but now it's shifted into sort of CDs and like just MP3s.
MP3s.
Yeah.
Well, and even at this point, it's shifted into you're now getting cloud mixing. Like some of the big
Cloud mixing.
online sites, you will have a $10 you'll pay for a monthly subscription to some online streaming service, and then
Right.
so like maybe let's say Spotify, for example, although they haven't developed it yet, and then you would just be able, whatever song is on that streaming service, you would just stream to your decks. So it's
Wow.
even bypassing physical MP3s. And
But
it's
is
just
there a lag
pure-
though? Is there a delay?
There will be a download. So when you're mixing, you will have already. Maybe you'll make a list of locally downloaded. You'll have either a cloud list that is sitting on a cloud that when you load it to your decks, it will, for the time it's loaded on the decks, essentially be locally downloaded. And then when you change songs or when you move it away from the deck and the actual software, then
Right.
it will be deleted. So it kind of gets put into memory and then it gets kicked out of memory once you're sort of done with it.
Right.
But in principle, you have high access. It's all about libraries, right? So I think with vinyl records, if you're playing a very niche set of some kind of underground music, something like trance or something, you may have, you take about 20 vinyls with you, or 30 vinyls. But if you're trying to DJ at a club, or you're trying to DJ something that's top 40, or something that's pop or hip hop,
It's
you want to
usually
have a
a
library.
few hours worth, right?
A few hours worth, and not only that, but some people may take requests, or
Right.
so you need to have a lot more songs, and it's hard to do that with vinyls. That's why CDs became so popular.
Right.
That's because you just burned a CD, a song that was released that day. You didn't need to wait for, go to the record shop to go and buy the vinyl.
Right.
And then MP3s then were a further level of sophistication on that. So then
Right.
you just download whatever you want.
Just to give some context, so if our viewers are not so familiar with what DJing is all about, like before we get into the slightly more technical things, how would you explain it? What is mixing? What is being a DJ?
I would say,
what do you do with the music?
I would say that DJing, the most sort of obtuse answer that I would say to people is DJing is just pressing play at the right time on a record, but moreover, sort of the whole concept of DJing is being in charge of the tunes at a party, basically.
Right.
And then when it comes to which tunes you play, at what point you play them, and how do you, and where sort of the skill, as it were, comes in, is how do you change between the songs so it doesn't sound very jarring. That's kind of where you start getting into very intricate DJ sets and multiple turntables and all the sort of very heavy sophistication. But fundamentally, you're just playing one song after the other, and then and in such a way that it sounds good, but also the crowd, and the crowd responds to it. So a lot of good DJs will see the crowd and they will play to the crowd. So you'll be able, there's a point. It's very bizarre. There's a point at which the crowd will begin to trust you, and so at the beginning when you start spinning, if nobody knows who you are, people will be like, people will be unsure about the music that you're going to play or what to expect from that night, and whether you play good or bad music can inform it informs the experience of the party goer. And so if the crowd enjoys the music you're playing, every time you play a new song or you move it, or you have, you play a new song, or you have a very classy transition between songs, or you play two songs at the same time, so there's a simultaneity. If the crowd enjoys that, this energy becomes quite palpable, and then there's a point at which the crowd essentially trusts you, and when the crowd trusts you, you can play whatever you want and they will like it. It's very bizarre. So I've had a record where I've in one event where I was doing terribly and I played the record and everyone hated it, and a separate event that was going very well and I played the same record and everyone, the roof went off.
Right.
So it's very much how you have very much the sort of conductor of the enery in the room, I guess.
That must be very hard because you're getting immediate response. It's an honest response. It's like
It
whether
is.
the dance floor is empty or whether it's full, right? So wow, I mean even as a performer, you don't get that sort of a direct sort of feedback, so it must be hard.
It's essentially like people
sometimes.
leaving. If you start singing and people don't like it, they leave. People. If you play a song and then people, I hate the song, and then I've seen dance floors just empty, and you're like,
wow,
oh my God.
that's really. It's really like Rotten Tomatoes almost.
No, very much so. It is and you're seeing it, right? Because it's not like when you're on stage performing, singing or whatever. Very often you've got the lights, and it's very hard to see the audience.
Yeah.
But if you're in a DJ booth just in the corner, I can see everybody.
Yeah.
And not only that, you'll have people that will look at you if you play something that they don't like. You'll often have people look at you as if you completely lost their mind. Your mind, and then just leave.
Right, because even stand-up comedians, people still have to sit there because they technically pay for their ticket, and but this one is like they can just do something else in the club. Wow. One question I have is because it's so continuous all the time. It means that you can't well, you can either pre-record all of it, but which defeats the purpose. Which also means then if you make a mistake, it's a mistake, right? You can't like fix. I mean, if a mistake happens, it just goes out.
Very much so. I mean, I've accidentally. I've stopped the music once by accident. I was trying to. You have 2 decks in front of you with the 2 different songs on them, and one of the songs was playing, and I was choosing the next song. And usually, it's something known as queuing, where you try and find the point in the song you want to start.
Right.
So I'm listening, trying to find the point in the song I want to start, and then I realised because you're doing start stop basically, and I was stopping the song that was going out over the sound system.
Oh gosh.
But usually, like in any kind of showbiz, just make it look deliberate.
Right. True.
If you just make it look like it was intentional, people will be like, eh.
Right.
And with nightlife, people are drinking, people are talking. If there's a 2-second noise that is annoying and then just never happens again,
right.
people don't notice.
Right. I'm currently watching a masterclass that's done by Questlove about DJing, and that's very interesting if you're interested. I'm starting to talk a lot about masterclasses here because I feel like they're so good and they're always related to what we're talking about. My other question for you is, so you're saying that there's one song going on and then you want to prepare the next song,
Precisely.
right? How would you see how the next song gets introduced after? Like if you're playing the track you're currently playing, you can't cue to the end of that track to see how it matches up with the next track.
No.
So how do you even?
So I would say so different DJs do it differently.
Right.
I do a lot of the parties I do in Singapore. I do a lot of the gay parties, and I do a lot of hip hop, a lot of top 40, pop, R&B. You need to know the songs. So I don't plan my sets. So the first song or 2, I might have an idea. I'm like, today I want to start with this song. But for the next 4 hours, 2 hours, whatever, will just be whatever I feel like I want to play next.
Right. So technically, you don't really listen to how it transitions.
Well, no. So the transition. So the transition. If I'm going to play, let's say I play a Beyonce song, I will know how that. I mean, you need to know how the song ends. Like,
right.
So I will just know the song. And so then when I'm coming in with the next song. What's more important when it comes to a lot of popular music is popular music makes me sound so old. The young children. When it comes to like popular music, is what the people will care more about the new song coming in and less about the song that you're ending, unless it has a very memorable end.
Right.
Right. So something like Formation by Beyonce, or something like 7 Rings by Ariana Grande. There's very specific final bars that people don't want to miss.
Right.
So you cut those off, people will be very annoyed.
Yeah.
But then most songs, like especially if you're playing a lot of hip hop, 1 verse, 1 chorus, everyone's a bit over the song. So they care more about. You need to time it, so something technically known as phrasing and all kinds of different mixing techniques so that it seems seamless, but it's more about how you bring the next song in rather than how you end the current song. So if I have a song that has a very memorable opening line, then you may you'll have them sort of at the same beat for maybe four beats, or maybe usually a 4-beat phrase with pop, or a 16-beat phrase. But you'll have them, so for 4 beats, you might begin to wind down the current song,
right.
And then you will throw out the current song, meaning you'll essentially end the current song and simultaneously start the next song that has the very memorable introduction or something. So it's all about that transition, basically. Right.
And do you work a lot with remixes? Do remixes actually help you? Because the remixes are different versions of the original song that sometimes have, like most often have, it's a longer version because there are added beats at the end and in front, so that the transitions, you can have that transition phase and perhaps even add effects, and you can do like some more magic. So do you prefer to work with remixes or originals?
I think if you're doing pop music, originals are much harder to work with, because originals, and often originals, especially if you're going a little bit towards rock or some R&B, it's not. Often it's what's known as analog, and an analog beat is one that a drummer is playing. And so a computer, he might not hit exactly the right timing for the entire 3-minute song, so you may actually have some strain. So very old disco, for example, is super hard to mix, because it's just a drummer just sitting there, and like if he slightly misses the timing, it completely throws it off. But sort of in response to your question, there are some very good remixes. I don't mind working with remixes. When I play, a lot of the gay parties I tend to play the originals, because people want to hear the original Gimme More by Britney Spears and not hear some remix of Britney Spears.
Right.
But there are instances where remixes come in. So I do, I was doing a collaboration for a while with an F45 studio, And I do a lot of workout mixes. I have a SoundCloud link that that has sort of links to a lot of the kind of mixes that I'm doing. And so I would say maybe in nightclubs I tend to play the originals, and then for exercise mixes or for something, so for exercise mixes I would play with some remix. Maybe it's a higher energy, or maybe it's truncated. Right. And then also, let's say you have a slow song. So a good example is like "Bleeding Love" by Leona Lewis. This is a slow song, but then a lot of these very popular diva slow songs have been remixed by gay producers to be at kind of a normal house level speeds that you can play in a nightclub. So these songs I would never get to play unless they were at a dance level, because they're ballads, and ballads, you play a ballad in a nightclub and everyone's like, it's a bit like a school dance.
Of course.
So those remixes are generally the ones I'll play.
So you're hopefully going to put some of these songs
yes,
we're talking about
yes.
on a Spotify playlist, right, to share with our
exactly.
or I'll go look them up.
I'll have a playlist. I've got a couple of playlists going, so I'll add another one to the old set.
Awesome, thank you. I have so many questions about DJing. Does a DJ have to have some sort of ability to hear pitch? Do you keep all your songs in the same key, or
interesting.
Or do different DJs do it differently?
Very good question. Key and pitch is key.
Because it will clash, right? If you're overlapping.
There are key clashing. Honestly, when it comes to pop, hip hop, R&B, I care very little about key. It's too hard to find songs that are in the same key, that match the same energy, and mostly, as I said, people care more about the next song you're going to play than they care about the transition between the two of them in some respects. So when it comes to pop, R&B, hip hop, I don't care about key. Now, if you're doing more sort of underground dance music genres, if you're thinking of like your Berlin dance music scenes with these, you may have heard of genres known as sort of techno, trance, these kind of things. Then it kind of becomes a dealer's choice. Some people care very much about key, some people care very little. So personally, I'm not musically trained, shockingly, and so.
But do you hear pitches?
I can hear pitch.
Okay.
I can generally hear key, but by virtue of not being musically trained, it's also not really something I'm massively keyed into, no pun intended.
Right.
So, but I do know that I have some friends who are classically trained, and they care very much about the key but key matters a lot more with long instrumental dance music, and long 8-minute songs that have one melody that comes in and out. Then if you're playing another song on top of that, the way you mix these kind of songs is often over a 32 beat or a 64 beat phrase, and all that means is for 64 beats you play them on top of each other, and then you slowly turn down the levels of one and you turn up the levels of the incoming one, and so it becomes seamless, and you don't actually realize what good DJ, the listener will not realize they've changed songs until halfway through the next song. They're like, oh, that's not what I was listening to. Their key clashes can be very jarring.
Wow. I wonder how they do it in the past, because now software you can sort of adjust the key, and even when you adjust the key, generally the tempo, the speed changes, because faster means higher pitched and lower, but now you can use software to sort of like not even have it stretch out, but the key changes.
You can just change key, yeah.
But in the past with vinyls, you can't do that, right?
No, you can't.
You can change the speed. But
you can change the speed, and the speed will change pitch. It's known as pitch bending. So I learned to DJ not off vinyls, I learned to DJ off CDs, but I learned to DJ where a very classic way of doing it. And so the old vinyl DJs are incredible. And a lot of the ways, because with vinyls, you can't look at the vinyl and know if you're synced or if you're not synced.
Right.
So with CDs, you can look at, because you essentially listen to it. So you look at the waveform is kind of the more technical way that you would do it with computerization. But the way that I learned to do it is you would take black tape, you would put it on top of all the displays of both of your turntable. So this display might tell you what the speed of the track is, so you literally don't know what the speed of the track is. So there's 120 beats per minute, 125 beats per minute, and then you also don't know. So you don't know what beat per minute you're at, and so you would have one playing in one ear, one playing in the other ear, and then you would have they would say, okay, you have 30 seconds to get them to sync them. So figure out which is faster and which is slower, which is not trivial. Like trying to figure out which one is faster and slower is not easy.
Right.
And then
so that's another thing where you're hearing what you're hearing in the house is also different from what you're hearing. So there's that aspect of it too. I mean, you have to be tuned out of what you're playing to put up what you're playing next.
Yes. And you often see DJs throw their phones off, so I tend to spin mostly with one phone on and one phone off.
Right.
So that I can, because I tend to in my ear I have the majority of the upcoming track playing. Also, you have two decks, so the majority of the upcoming track playing in my ear.
Right.
And then I listen to the current track over the house sound system.
Right.
And then also I can hear transitions. But what some people will do is have the headphones on the whole time, and there's a setting on the DJ set or on the mixer that lets you go from only what's on the upcoming track to what's coming over the sound system. So you can actually you can choose how. So there is different ways of doing it.
Right, but do you still hear? Because my neighbor, she's a DJ apparently.
No,
because
really?
I talked to her very nicely. We're on very good terms still. But I talked to her about the loud music, and I said, is it possible you tune it down? And she says, well, I have to practice. And so my question to you is, does the environment sound spill into your monitors? Did you need an element of that to try and listen up against, or does she need that loud sound loudness around her?
Well, I don't know your neighbor. I personally play in silent conditions. So when I play mixes, so I do Twitch streams, and I would also DJ some parties last year for Pink Dot and this kind of stuff. We worked around some Zoom stuff. No, there's no music coming out of my speakers, so it's just me on the phones. Because as I said, on the headphones, I can hear only what's coming in the upcoming track, or I can hear what's coming in what's being broadcast, and then I can choose. Do I want 50-50, 40-60?
Got it.
So you can do it all through the headphones.
But if you do play in a live, loud space, is there always the spill of what's outside into your headphones?
Generally, most of the spaces I played in, not really. So, I mean, the headphones themselves do a relatively good job. They're usually, I mean, I use over-ear, but on-ear or over-ear, you're basically isolated with your phones. And most spaces that people play these kind of music in, they're just not. Like, if you were to do Esplanade or something like that, I think you would begin to suffer from reverb and Doppler effects. But we just don't play them big enough. I mean, small nightclubs, generally, you don't have to worry about it.
All right,
so okay.
Neighbor, you better be playing in a big space.
Exactly. She's not doing National Day.
Yeah, she's right. Let's move on to look at the vinyls now. We'll talk about I don't know, any interesting things you can add. There's a place that when Thorin is free, I think we might go visit. But I've been there, and I managed to grab this. There's still lots of, even talking to you, saying like a lot of records that have not been digitized, and this is one of them. I don't know why not. I mean, it's a Julie Andrews.
Yeah, there are Julie Andrews fans everywhere. How has no one digitized this record?
It's not on Spotify, it's not anything. So we're going to play it just for fun. I'm going to let Thorin play it since he's our guest. I don't even know how do you hold it, is that how you do it? And then
and then just hold it by the... Just avoid touching it as much as possible.
Right.
What side do you want to play?
Depends on what you want to hear. There's Someone to Watch Over Me. Is that quite a classic? It's the start of side 2. So that's side 2.
It's not in bad condition actually. This was used, you said.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well,
so $17. This was
17 is super affordable. I mean, these days vinyls cost. You have to mortgage your child.
All the disco ones, as I mentioned, are going at $5. I don't know at Red Point. Where I'll put the link in the video description.
Yeah, because most of them, a lot of the current ones are at the Adelphi, and so I'm interested in some of them. The Adelphi ones, I mean, they do wonderful business, and do go to the Adelphi. They have amazing selection of music in a couple of different areas there. But they're a pretty penny because they do a wonderful job of restoring the records, which is great. But then you're also paying for the manpower on the record restoration, which is worth it, but you're also paying for the manpower on the record restoration. You know, so
yeah, let's just lower it. You can lower it.
Oh, you got all these fancy lower back in the day.
Is that fancy?
Yeah, well, no, back in the day, you used to have to lower by, literally by hand. I love the tinny sound. The Crossleys have a wonderful, because I love playing the older vinyls on the Crossleys, just because, I mean, it's not an amazing sound system, but the tinniness is very much how it would have been heard in
I can only listen to like older music on the vinyl because otherwise I would expect more. So this is nice, but you said you had a player. This is still introductory level, by the way. I mean, you said you had a player that exports the audio to a Bluetooth speaker, which this doesn't do. The Crossleys have one where you can play it on another device and it actually is a Bluetooth speaker, but that's not what I'm looking for, because when you want to listen to a vinyl, apparently it's better quality than a CD, right?
You're right. You
want to listen to it on a better speaker system, otherwise...
So you want to... So the way how the music's coming out is kind of what you care about. So when it actually comes to Bluetooth, a lot of vinyl purists, there are only vinyl purists watching, I do apologize, a lot of vinyl purists will say, how can you listen to it on a Bluetooth? You're a terrible, terrible human. Because the depth of sound on a vinyl, it does, in principle, have a higher depth of sound than you would get on a digital, so on something like a CD or on something coming from a computer.
Right.
But you need to have something that has access to that kind of depth of sound, which, I mean, unless you have $1,000 headphones, and those $1,000 headphones are using a 1.5 gauge, which is the very thick, like they look like RCA jacks, but they're just really thick.
Yep.
And you go directly into it. Often needs to be a gold gauge to reduce the loss.
Right.
You're not going to notice it.
Right. I see.
So
even with the headphones that I plug into here, they sound better already.
Yeah, do you get a good sound from it?
It's slightly better, I think, than
I mean, they do, and especially for the older stuff as well. The vinyls, yeah, I mean, vinyls in principle just have a more robust kind of sound to them. But the only problem with vinyl, of course, the sound is more robust. But by virtue of the fact that you have a needle that's going over the surface, over time it will wear it. So one does need to relatively maintain the vinyls. In Singapore, you should get them cleaned about once a year, maybe more, because they get mouldy.
Oh right. But you can't
from the humidity.
Right. Yeah. But you can't stop it from wearing out though, right?
No. And in my opinion, vinyls were made to be played, and so a lot of people have collector's vinyls, which is amazing, and for a lot of people these are very meaningful sort of items that get passed through generations. But all the vinyls I have, I play them until they get worn out because.
Right. Oh, they do wear out. I mean, you've seen them wear out.
I haven't personally worn any out from the start. I picked up vinyls that look like this because they've had water damage from some previous owner or something. So I've seen vinyls reach a point of wearing out. I mean, you play it once a month, you'll be fine for 50 years.
Right.
You're not gonna. But if you're playing a lot of DJs in the early days would be playing vinyls on a daily basis, and they were scratching too, right? So scratching. Yeah. I mean, I won't do it on the system, but scratching, you essentially stop it.
You can.
No, I don't. A, I'm not very good at scratching vinyl, and B, I'm not sure how this isn't designed to scratch, and so the soft needle.
I've done a bit of it anyway. I mean,
were you scratching?
Yeah, I was scratching.
But essentially, you would just put your finger on it, and then as you go through you would be able to go through a sound that just this kind of sound. So and that will wear out your.
Oh really?
I mean,
because you're scratching it
a couple of thousand times.
Right.
Just don't do it. Just do it to Julie once or twice. You'll be fine.
That's so interesting. Digital stuff doesn't wear out. So that's the OCD in me is like, do I want to play my vinyls now? But speaking of vinyls, just play them, right? What's interesting is my Katy Perry vinyl. I was telling you earlier. Is a new print, and I heard from the store. I was wondering if it was my player that was not working or the record itself, but. He told me that new vinyls are cut less deep than the old ones, so the old ones actually play better. Do you?
Oh, the guy at the store said this?
Yeah. Do you find that, or have you been?
I don't know if I've ever really. I mean, the really old. I mean, this kind of Julie Andrews stuff. I wouldn't expect it to be especially. So there's a 180 gram vinyl, which is your heavyweight vinyl, and then you have your regular vinyl. So the heavyweight vinyl is when they have box sets that get released from X, Y, and Z.
Right.
These are those are very expensive, and those are very deeply cut, super robust. So this, I don't know. I mean, it's just not 180 gram. I don't know what the term is they use for it.
You can still see the lines on the Katy Perry one. You barely see the.
Really?
Yeah, I'll show you later.
Oh, you could well be right then. I mean, if the Katy Perry one isn't a heavyweight vinyl, then I'm inclined to believe. The chap at the store knows what he's saying.
Right.
Really, it's not. You can't see the grooves.
It's very faint.
Interesting.
Very faint, and I
wonder why.
It's probably just for aesthetics. It's just you just collect it.
Is it transparent or something? Because sometimes they come on some of these gimmicky transparent purple or transparent.
No, it's orange. It's bright orange.
Okay.
It's just meant to look. I think.
Yeah.
More than anything.
But then you can't get the sound out on your player.
The sound comes out, but it just skips so much at the same positions. I have to put my finger on it. Or put a coin on the
So this is also to do with the weighting of the arm. So you have, I mean, you have an entire system here that you can, most vinyl systems, if you sort of upgrade to some fancy system, you can choose how you weight the vinyl arm.
Wow.
I don't know enough about vinyls to do that, but in principle you can do that. Right.
Well, this is just introductory stuff. Cool. So
it's a very cute record though. And it's a lovely player. I mean, these old sounds, especially, I used to have one of these when I lived in the US. And I would play. I'd get at the time it was before the vinyl craze went off.
Right.
And I'd play a lot of Aretha, and a lot of the old soul, and especially some of the tinniness that comes from there's a tinniness coming from the vinyl, but the way it kind of comes through the sound system too. I mean, you've got just a small speaker in there, so it's got a very classic.
It does. It
classicness
really does.
Too.
I'm surprised that I don't hear it more scratchy. Is that from the vinyl being worn out? The scratchy sounds.
Yeah. So it scratches as it gets worn. So this has just been kept in very good condition, and you can see kind of visibly where it makes scratchy noise or where you get crackles. You can generally see where that's happening.
Wow. Okay, I've never actually looked closely.
So your vinyl looks good. For $17, that is a very good buy from Julie
Are they
Andrews.
normally more than 17 in general? Like, I don't even know what the normal prices are. Like Singapore in terms of.
I haven't bought many secondhand in Singapore, to be fair.
Right.
I mean,
but an original would be 30. Like just like
if this is original Julie Andrews, you're probably looking somewhere between 40 and 50.
Really?
So
wow.
they're not. So I picked up a Janis Joplin album the other day. I mean, it was in meticulous condition. The guys over at the Adelphi do a wonderful job with storing and restoration. But yeah, I mean the condition that this is kept in, 17 is a very good buy.
Wow.
And I'm guessing that the shop you're buying it from is I mean they get truckloads from various secondhand collectors and this kind of thing, and then they flog them off. So.
Yeah. Wow. If you buy more, they also sort of give you a discount.
Yes.
I bought 2 the other day, and they just sort of like cut a few dollars off each one, so it's very nice of them.
Exactly.
So the next thing we want to talk about is like I guess the gay scene in Singapore. You say you play at many gay events as well, and you being gay yourself.
Shockingly.
I guess so how do you find that it's difficult living as a gay person in Singapore, with the rules?
I think it's an interesting question. So it's always important to sort of preface my experience in Singapore is very much an experience that is coming as a cis, white, able-bodied male Westerner, right? So I'm privy to a lot of the benefits of being gay in Singapore without being concerned that my aunt is going to see me on the train kind of thing. So personally, my experience has been relatively comfortable. I lived in the USA, I lived in the UK, and in a lot of these countries, in the US, I faced quite overt homophobia. Mostly verbal homophobia when I was much younger, sort of early 20s, and in the UK, you'll get a kind of verbal homophobia, but it won't be slurs being thrown at you. I mean, of course it happened, but it won't. In my experience, it was less slurs and more kind of people be like, "Oh, is that your sister's T-shirt?" And occasionally it was.
Well, it's
but that's
from
not
what you're
point.
wearing because it's right.
It depends how gender normative the clothing you're wearing is and these kind of things.
Right, obviously, because you look very straight when you play soccer. I mean,
I know. I have to listen to Britney before and after just to get out of that.
Which is another thing that like is very. It's quite. I mean, it's not a stereotype that you would see.
There are very few.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
There's very few gay footballers, and I think it's understandable because a lot of these sort of team sports, like they're super mass spaces, especially when people are younger. These are very masculine spaces that they're also very kind of being picked last in gym class. There's a lot of experience that a lot of queer folk go through, and so a lot of team sports are the team sports that are selecting people. But then when it comes to games like football, rugby, even though they're ironically incredibly homoerotic, they generally sort of cater to, and it's I think it's socio-cultural as well, because like in the United Kingdom, football's also a little bit more of a your kind of SES level also will inform kind of what sports you're interested in, and then conservatism and how that changes according to economic status also is all kind of intrinsic. But it does lead to a weird, often at parties people are like, but you're gay. How can you play? How can you do that?
There's that for sure.
But there's an innate satisfaction if you knock over a straight person who's got the, or you're like, I'm gay and I knocked you over.
Nice. Would you say, like, I have some expat friends that come over, they're gay and they use Grindr, and so I get the impression that he's like, oh, there are hundreds of messages on Grindr when I like fresh meat and stuff. Would you say there's a hunger for a white male in general in Singapore, or at the same time do you get shunned by so the terms rice is like Asian, like rice for rice, or what is it, potato for potato, for white for white? I don't know. Right.
No, I mean white people just generally assume that by being the normative one they don't bother giving themselves. So I just be like, I think white for white maybe. No,
white for white, yeah.
This is a very, very interesting question, because this is something that is the experience of a lot of Westerners in Singapore, and you will often hear parroted, exactly as your friend said, I get so many messages, rah, rah. I think fundamentally, what is this conversation 2 nights ago? I think fundamentally what's happening is you have an undersaturation of Westerners for people who are interested in meeting or having sexual liaisons or whatever with Westerners. Right. So I would hazard to say the majority of Singaporeans are relatively unconcerned. The majority of gay Singaporeans relatively unconcerned with meeting Westerners. Actually, I don't really think, in my experience, and then also with Western friends and with local friends, most Singaporeans are not so interested in meeting Westerners, but the ones who are interested in meeting Westerners, there are few enough. And Western, of course, coded as white Western in this context. There are still enough people interested in meeting white people, and a few enough white people that this appears to the white people like they are just everyone just falling at their feet. And it can lead to a certain amount of arrogance that I think many people are quite privy to, where so a lot of these gentlemen just expect people to kind of fall at their feet, and it informs how they interact with locals as well, which can be super toxic.
It can be. Whereas on the flip side, it also what am I trying to say? For someone who's not as appreciated in a sense, I guess, in their own country, when they come here, they may not get arrogant, but they may actually feel like, oh wow, I finally, I can. There's appreciation for me.
No, that is a very no. This is literally the part two to that the soapbox, my TED talk, is that you're exactly right. And so a lot of folk come from the Western world, and then of course where there's sort of white privilege inherent, and they may not receive the same attention that they want to have received or whatever. So when they come to Singapore, and if they receive more attention than they received when they were in their own country, this already can lead to problematic behavior. But what I've seen happen more often than not is that they will often then project a lot of their own insecurity from the experiences that they had in their own country onto the local guys, who are then falling over them, which just leads to a really sort of toxic circle. And so of course it's not always happening, but it's very difficult given the level of privilege I think that white folk have when they come into these spaces, and especially sexual spaces where if you're looking at adult content, and a lot of it is is essentially your like buff white man figure. People don't take the time to stop and think about. Nobody thinks about their position. Why am I? Why does it seem that I'm so popular? Or they just take it as kind of a given. But I think it can really lead to very toxic interactions.
For sure.
So, but I think that's a very astute observation, because it definitely happens. In my opinion, that dialogue is not really being had, and I think that dialogue needs to be had, because I think it also leads to a lot of animosity between a lot of the majority of Singaporean folks. Like I said, are very unconcerned whether there's foreigners or not. You have some who, they're happy. Nice to have foreigners come along, new people. Like there's a new face on Grindr or whatever. But the majority of people are also quite wary of often the way that white folk conduct themselves, and don't really want to be involved with it.
Sadly, then it also puts the nicer ones, like sort of a there's people already put that barrier up. Do you think it was the same for the? Well, I guess I would have to speak from my experience. An Asian in a Western country, in a sort of, well, not Western, but like
majority white country.
Majority white country. I wonder if there's that effect too, where the Asian can feel like he is king, but I would say maybe not so much. I'm not sure.
I think it runs into fetish politics, which is a bit of a loaded term, but is essentially a lot of folk of colour, whatever background they come from, but especially in our community, Asian folk will go into white countries and or white majority countries, and often they'll either get no attention or they'll get almost unwanted attention. It's almost extreme, and unwanted attention often feels loaded. So it's not, he likes me for me. He likes me because of my background, the language I speak, blah blah blah. And so essentially fetishization, and that becomes
and so we're getting. Would you say
super deep from Julie?
Exactly. Fetishization, could that apply to like a white person being in Singapore, where it's like, I only like you because you're white? Is that the same thing, or is that different? Because
so I think the basic concept of fetishization is similar, but then you also have global, and this is sort of making it theoretical, but then you have essentially global race hierarchies. So you have the position, so sort of succinctly.
So it's slightly different, right?
So it's a little bit different. I still know. I have white friends who are not interested in having interactions with people where they feel that they are being sort of one-dimensionalized. And whether you want to see irony in that is, open to the viewer. But so that is something that gets felt. But where that comes from, I guess the place in which that's coming from is not dissimilar, but it's also informed by basic sexual racial hierarchies within the queer community. Why do we do this to ourselves?
It's all very interesting, and there's also a lot of these apps have taken away the preference feature, which it's a good thing, but I also wonder, like, this is all up for debate, right? That's why we're here talking about it, because it doesn't get talked about enough.
Agreed.
I could say, like, I like purple. And what's wrong with that? I mean, if I want my clothes to be
this kind of like,
is that is it the same thing saying like I prefer a white guy, I prefer an Indian guy, I prefer an African guy, and you're taking that choice away from me? Not necessarily racist. I mean, is that, can you equate it with in the same way as you would to colors?
I think it becomes. I think you can with colours mainly because you have some socio-historical legacy of racial relations in the last 500 years, and especially Singapore being an ex-colonial country. But I think moreover, you have, I think fundamentally for me, because the conversation can be had blue in the face, and I think for me fundamentally it comes down to a concept known as race policing. So when I say on my profile, no blacks, no whatever, this is me outwardly rejecting people who didn't even ask you in the first place.
Right.
So this is you going out to people and you're like, none of you, you're not good enough. You're not good. It's like reverse Oprah. And so there's a difference between fundamentally race policing and then not responding. If you choose not to responding to this person's that person because they give you this kind of vibe, they give you that kind of vibe. If you're not responding to Indian people, that may be, it's not as aggressive of saying no Indians, but at the same time, there I think becomes an individual responsibility to have a word with, is there a deeper reason why I'm not responding? Is this because I don't, if you bring into colours, is it because I don't like redheads? Is it because I don't like, what about it? Is it them being this racial group, or is it deeper, so like actually deconstruct your attraction? And I think that's what's so interesting about sex. I mean, even you look at, adult content online, you look at porn and these kind of things, you will have sort of the most quote-unquote woke activists Googling, and this is hypotheticals, woke folk Googling really racial, big black cock, these kind of stuff. It's weird how sex it's almost permissive to have a primitiveness or a primevalness, which would be completely inappropriate in every other aspect of our lives,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Really good thoughts. Thank you for articulating, and do you feel like the gay community in general here in Singapore, from your knowledge, is heading towards like a more open, or even like straight couples? Are we all heading towards a more polyamorous sort of a thing? Like there's a lot of open relationship sort of like statuses.
I think so. I mean, I think open relationships is something that in the last couple, maybe in the last 10 years, it sort of began coming up. In about 10 years ago, I remember you'd hear it in the wind. And then in the last 5 years, it very much comes to the forefront. And there's some wonderful, when it comes to open relationships, and then also it comes to sort of thruples and poly arrangements, you do have some wonderful examples. Even in Singapore, there was recently on Joshua Simon and S03E07 Boys podcast, they interviewed a gentleman. Put a link in there, They interviewed a gentleman, Paul Ung, who he's in a relationship with two other gentlemen, and then he also ended up picking up a fourth, and he does a nice job of, laying bare exactly how he navigates this kind of poly. So I think visibility, but I think fundamentally being gay gives you the opportunity to, because we are already outside of the traditional nuclear family unit, it gives you a chance to explore, I have a non-traditional relationship, how can I forge a relationship that works for me? Yeah. And for a lot of individuals, openness gives them access to intimacy or novelty that they may not be getting with their partner, and just all kinds of stuff. So I think yes. Long answer to a short question. Yes, I do.
Right. Because two males are generally more sexual than I would guess. Yeah. Like that's why there's this joke that if you go to a gay sauna, there's lots happening, and you go to it isn't even a lesbian sauna, right? Like they're just talking to each other because that's how they connect.
Bookshops,
it's really bad
bookshops.
Really, so I mean, with two men, it is. I mean, that's why I guess in gay relationships, there's more of open relationships happening, because it's just that itch that you need to scratch, I guess. I
think so, and I think some people are able to divorce the physical aspect with commitment, emotions. Yeah, I mean, whether it's emotional or whatever. So I think. And I think it's good that more people are beginning to explore these kind of, and I mean, I have straight friends who are also beginning to explore more kind of open concepts, because I think openness as a term too often gets a little bit bastardized, if you pardon my French, in as much as it will be this terms of open doesn't suddenly mean that your relationship is no longer as valid or whatever. It's just how sort of ones can, who is permitted into the relationship, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think in generally it's healthy because it just gives, if you're having an open relationship, you're actually talking about what you need. Mm-hmm. You're talking about sex, you're talking about intimacy, you're talking about what is it, and I think that is important for a lot of couples for growth, even if they don't choose openness. It's just it's important to vocalize what actually works for you and not what you think you should be expected to work for you.
Yeah. And in some ways you also give your partner that or rather you let go of that part of you that, the demons that make you jealous and things like that, and I think that could be healthy for a relationship too. Because
you can get rid of some of these demons, especially, jealousy is a huge, sort of a huge emotional barrier for a lot of couples. Yeah. And you're a little bit, when you're able to kind of shed some of these, it'd be unkind to say superficialities, but when you're able to shed some of these sort of surface level emotions, you're able to, insecurities, I think is a better way to put it. You're able to begin to identify much more meaningful bonds and this kind of thing. And so, so I think it's good for, and I think in Singapore too, you are also, in the Western world, everyone's in an open relationship in the Western world. The unusual ones are the one in the closed relationship, and I do say that flippantly. But I think in Singapore you are seeing, there is more discussion that's going on and more dialogue, which is important because people fundamentally, you should get a relationship that works for you and your partner, and that makes you, you just want to be happy, right? And make sure,
absolutely,
be happy.
So we're moving on to our last topic. We've had great conversation so far. The last thing I want to talk about is, I guess, being an expat in Singapore. Funnily enough, I wonder, is it like, do you call migrant workers, the Indian workers, would you call them expats? Like, is there a different class to being a foreigner? But so we'll talk about that, but as well as like your experiences and, I think my question to you is like, why is it some expats don't leave their bubbles? That exists, right? Where they hang out with other expats only, they don't explore the local food. Whereas, I think someone like Thorin, I would say, does explore. He just goes around, mixes around, and and I think it's more enriching in that way. Well, but to each his own. And what thoughts do you have on any of these?
I generally veer away from using the term expat myself, just because it is so class loaded. There's no fundamental difference between if you're a migrant worker, you're a migrant worker. Now, that being said, if you're a migrant worker and they hold up a Home Depot skin tone palette and they say, oh well, you get an E-pass, but you get an S-pass, there is passport privilege, I guess, is maybe the nicest way to put it, where you have, if you're coming from the United Kingdom and you're moving into this kind of job, then you will expect to receive this kind of social visit by, employment pass or your visa. But if you're coming into the construction industry, so there is, of course, this stratification is fundamentally where the concept of expatness comes from. But I try and, at least for myself, just avoid at least calling myself expat, because I think it's just a little, there's a little uppity. But I think the expat communities are interesting because when people go to the big reason is, why do you go to another country? Why would you move somewhere?
Right.
And so I play football with a lot of straight folk, and many of them are sort of early to mid 30s, and a lot of them have come over involved in shipping and involved in sort of a lot of industries. And so the question that you ask is, are you here because you're interested in Asia? Are you here because you were offered double the amount that you were offered in your home country? Or, is it sort of alternate reasons? And I think this informs the experience that you want to have. That being said, I have friends who have come over in very high-paying jobs and have made an effort to go out to food centres and this kind of thing. But I think that is an important aspect, is why are you here?
Right.
And so, and I think also when you come here, so for gay folk, when you come here and the kind of people that you're looking to get to know, I think as well, you have some people who are open to anyone from any kind of background. I have some friends who are only really interested in meeting other white folk, which very much informs their experience moving through Singapore. And for many of them can be quite a difficult experience because it is unusual to have white folk looking for, and this is perhaps a stereotype, but I think it is true to an extent, white folk looking for other white folk to have meaningful romantic relationships with in Singapore. A lot of people come here, and this is propagated through the straight community too. This is nothing new. A lot of people will come here, play around for 2 years, and then go back to their home country and have a relationship with their high school sweetheart. This kind of thing. So it's. I have a couple of friends who are more interested. They're white and they're more interested in meeting white folk, and they have very difficult time making meaningful romantic sort of relationships.
I would imagine it'd be difficult. But there are these. There are like groups you can join. Expats.
Agreed.
only groups, even for out in SG by Tim Birch, is it?
Tim.
They're different groups that you can join to.
No, agreed. So what Singapore is Singapore's unique because Singaporeans, I mean, they're all native English speakers, right? And so fundamentally you have people coming from all over the world, and access to local culture is high because you're able to immediately ask questions about local culture should you be interested in it. And so then going into that, initially a lot of sort of nightlife, how do gay people meet other gay people, especially, they might move through apps, or if people want a more, more of a platonic sense and they're not looking for romantics, they'll go to bars, go to clubs, meet people through friends and this kind of things. And so when it comes to those social groups, so you have kind of your nightclub, you have sort of your nightclub crowds, and you have nightclubs and parties that go from very much kind of beach parties that go more to kind of queer events, and then you have what Tim's done with House and SG. I mean, I think also they would be quite impressed by how they've been able to grow it, which is very much a group that cares more about making meaningful friendships with other queer or other gay folk before being just a direct, sort of hookup in interaction, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's very comfortable for a lot of individuals because that doesn't go under the pretense of feeling like there's predation, which can often be the case when you go into more sexualized spaces like nightclubs where everyone's had a few drinks and these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much.
No, not at all. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Was there anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I think we more or less covered it.
All right.
Mostly.
You can follow Thorin on Instagram if you like.
Yes, please follow me at Captain Steve69. It's a very classy Instagram handle. It'll be in the
video description.
Be in the video description, and then also follow me on SoundCloud, and then also
Oh, you have your music there.
Yes, I've got SoundCloud. I've got Spotify playlists. I've got SoundCloud. She's been busy over lockdown. And also, as nightclubs begin to open again, please do check out. Check out my Instagram for more updates. But there are some really wonderful queer nightlife promoters working out there, including people like Becca D'BUss, Bobby Law, and then sort of everyone in between who are already throwing regular drag shows. Have just started 2 weeks ago again at the Projector.
I've heard, yeah.
And
nice.
so there's things. So things are starting up again. So do sort of stay involved and put a head out, and then hopefully see you at something sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, you can also check out, I interviewed Becca D'BUss on another episode of Dwayne. It's called Spinvestigators. And Thorin has also worked with Asha. I'll put a link in below. He spun for a little online concert she's done about it. All right, catch you next time. Bye.
Bye, thank you.